Welcome to the week 3 go-to session. So this is the third out of 4 go-to sessions we're having this month. Today, we're going to mostly go over the main activity you have to complete this week, which is the actual first draft of your presentation. We've been studying presentations. This week, Sunday, you handed in your plan for your presentation. I'm grading those now. My hope is to get them done by midnight tonight. Technically, we aim for a 72-hour turnaround, but I'd like to try to make it as close to 48 as possible so you have feedback that you can use before you start working on creating your presentation. I might have to burn the midnight oil. At the very latest, maybe I need tomorrow morning to finish up the last handful or so, but I am working on grading those plans that you handed in on Sunday. Okay, kind of like last week, I think I'm going to start with the main activity for this week and go over it with some care, and then we'll get to some big picture concepts that you learn from this week's reading because they will directly apply to your presentation. So far, we've been talking in general what the presentation is about. So tonight we have Janet and Jasper with us. Welcome, both of you. If you've been attending or watching the previous lectures, you know that I've been sort of hammering home this idea again and again, what we're working toward, which is a 3 to 4 minute presentation. Sometimes I say 3 to 5 minutes because if it goes a little bit over, that's fine. A 3 to 5 minute presentation aimed at potential employers. You imagine yourself 2 years in the future, so you're already a Full Sail grad. You have the experiences behind you of being a graduate, specific skills acquired. Specific experience. Some people come to Full Sail already with terrific experience. I've had people intern for recording studios. I think I mentioned in a previous lecture, I even had a pretty big gospel singer who I believe was signed to gospel or Motown gospel or something like that. But he was here Full Sail, trying to improve his craft and the production side of things. So we get all types here, but probably we get mostly people who are learning about their industries now. Okay, so maybe they haven't built up much experience, but that's why we push this presentation into the future, so you can realistically imagine what you will accomplish during your 2 years here and be able to state it like it is things that you've done. Actually, let me go. Okay, so we're looking at the FSO platform here. And as you can see, by design, things sort of slow down a bit. So the first 2 weeks, you had the TED Talk analysis. This past week, of course, you had the planning document. These weeks slow down in the sense that there's only one more discussion, graded discussion you have to participate in. And that's simply a peer review. Once you do hand in the first draft of your presentation this Sunday, you'll also post it to the peer review board for week 4, and everybody will give one another some feedback. I'm sorry, I was trying to read some comments in the chat there. What was I saying? Yeah, you'll post it to the peer review board. So that's kind of the final discussion. That's worth 10%. But mostly these last 2 weeks, we're devoting entirely to you first drafting your presentation and then improving it for the final day of class. So let's take a look at the actual draft assignment sheet. This should look familiar because if you'll remember for the assignment that was due this past Sunday night, you had 2 sets of instructions. And I caution people not to get confused because there were 2 sets of instructions. One was simply to look at, because how can you plan for the final presentation if you haven't looked at the instruction sheet for that presentation? So probably you've already taken a look at this, but let me just point out a couple things. On the left here, you get the basic instructions, right? 3 to 4 minute presentation aimed at potential employers. You're going to put yourself in the future as a graduate of your degree program. Okay, and here's another note that you can actually use examples of things you're planning or hoping to do during the next 2 years and write about them as if you've already accomplished them. I will say real quickly that it should be realistic. I once had a student who was either, what was she in? Music production, I think. And she stated her experience included working with artists like Nicki Minaj and Taylor Swift and Kanye West, which actually that last one didn't make much sense because Kanye West kind of burst onto the scene as a producer, and then he became a successful solo artist, so I'm not sure why he would need production help. But you can see the bigger problem too, right? I mean, these aren't realistic statements of what that person could have accomplished during her 2 years at Full Sail. So yes, think about things that you could realistically accomplish. I encourage doing a little bit of digging. You might speak to other people in your program. You might take a look at the Full Sail area, the website for your specific degree. You might reach out to people. Perhaps an instructor would be more than happy. Most instructors here are more than happy to help out students in other classes to find out what sorts of things you'll be working on the next 2 years. Because, yes, you should be able to list specifically what your skills are. That means specific tools, specific software, specific pieces of equipment. If you don't know those things, you probably want to learn what those things are. Same thing with like projects. So if you're a film student, perhaps you find out that, yes, as a film student, you'll probably create a short film before you finish your studies here. And yeah, you should even go into more details, such as giving the name of the film a title, maybe describing a bit, or if you're in gaming, maybe you have to create a short playable game or a playable level before you graduate. So sure, if you can describe what that is, like I designed 3 playable levels for a first-person shooter or an RPG. Also, maybe give it a title, briefly describe what it's about, because that's what people do when they really go in for interviews. And I've always said that this assignment, in some ways, you might want to think of it as imagine a world where instead of cover letters and resumes, the person who's in charge of hiring has to go through all these 3 to 4 minute presentations. So you have 3 to 4 minutes to present yourself in an interesting way. This session, we're going to talk about specific techniques you can use because, and this is one of the things Nancy Duarte points out in her chapters, right, in our textbook, that lots of presentations are kind of like data dumps. People have lots of facts, statistics, and they just present them. So yeah, this 3 to 4 minute presentation shouldn't sound like you just reading a resume. My skills are, my experience is, my qualifications are, right? You should find an interesting way to present yourself in those 3 to 4 minutes. And like I said, we'll talk about some techniques today. But yeah, certainly the more specific you can be, the better. And that means really taking a look at what you think you'll accomplish during the next 2 years. Okay, so yeah, sometimes students say, so it's a little bit of pretend. And I say, no, not really. Pretend is when you wildly make something up. This is actually truthful and accurate to a certain degree. You may not have accomplished these things, but you certainly realistically could. Okay, so to the right here, we have a bunch of bullet point questions. And I know things get a little bit confusing. I sort of wish that the creative presentation department would streamline things a little bit, because you just completed an assignment where you had to go through bullet points and thoughtfully answer each question. And here's the actual presentation instructions, and there are more bullet points. My caution here is be careful. These questions are more like thought questions. So, for example, what do you know about your industry? What is that industry? What are some interesting points about it, etc. But yeah, these are things for you to consider, because the goal here is that maybe if you go through these questions, either think about them in your head carefully or maybe take notes, that this is sort of in your wheelhouse. It's sort of in your arsenal of weapons or tools that you can use. So when you sit down and create your presentation, you're working from a place of knowledge. But every so often I get a student who creates a presentation and the first slide says something like, my target industry is, here's what's interesting about my industry. And of course, that doesn't belong in the presentation. That's more for you to consider, because obviously if you're speaking to potential employers, they know what your industry is. They don't need these questions literally answered. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. Janet and Jasper and whoever watches this video after the fact. And listen, some of these questions obviously will apply. It will be impossible probably for you to create a presentation that doesn't focus on what skills or qualities you have. But yeah, be careful. These are thought questions. And if we go to the final page of the instructions, you have some more information, right? Some more details about what you're trying to do, that you're creating a future representation of yourself and doing so in a presentation that you're going to deliver to potential employers. There are more questions to consider, right? Again, these are kind of questions that are for yourself, but they will probably end up in the presentation in some way. Hopefully your presentation will show what makes you unique, what makes you fit for the industry. Obviously, I just said you'll discuss knowledge and skills that you have. etc. And then I'll let you read through the rest of the document, and I'll encourage you to always make sure that you're reading through instructions thoroughly. I kind of highlight the important stuff, but that cannot make up for reading this document in its entirety. So just some obvious stuff, like use a tool that you're familiar with. PowerPoint is popular, but PowerPoint is not the only option that's out there. There's Keynote, which is kind of Mac's version of PowerPoint, but there are also other tools. So I've already talked in previous weeks about Prezi, which is an online presentation tool. Powtoon. Sometimes that can be a little bit inappropriate depending on your audience, but that's sort of a cartoon building program. It's presentation software, but it sort of runs like animation. I'm a big fan of using video editing software as a presentation tool because you don't just have to record actual film. You can drag in images just as you would in a normal presentation software, and make use of all the tools that are available to you in that video editing software. So pick a tool that you either want to learn or that you're already familiar with. And yeah, you can consider the rest of the questions here on your own. I will say real quickly, and here, like some of the tools I just mentioned, they're listed for you. One other important thing I have to say is that this should be the best possible work you can do. You can submit by Sunday. Yes, it's a draft, but draft doesn't mean, that you have like 3 slides and the slides are hastily put together. Maybe there's an image, but it's a blurry image, or it's an image that doesn't quite make sense because it's just a placeholder image until you find something better. And that I don't have much of an idea what's actually going to go with the slides. The more you have in place, the more feedback I can give. I think that's the way to look at it. But yeah, in order to get maximum points on this assignment, there should be a presentation that's more or less in place. Obviously, I won't be taking off points if it's not perfect. I'll understand that it's a work in progress. But yeah, draft means that I have something to work with. So you should start working as soon as possible. If you feel confident already, you can begin immediately and then read my feedback on your planning document and apply it as you see fit. But yeah, you probably don't want to wait until Sunday afternoon to start working on this, because that's when things get thrown together at the last second and things look perhaps a little bit sloppy. A full draft means that, yeah, your slides should be in place. If the images aren't perfect, okay, but hopefully something is in place that I can use. Remember, this is a 3 to 4 minute presentation, so there will be voiceover. Okay. So it would be great if you could have that voiceover recording in place. If not, if for some reason maybe you put more energy into the visual look of the presentation, and didn't quite have time to record the voiceover, that might be okay if I have a careful script to look at. Even more awesome, certain programs like PowerPoint have a notes function. So below the slide, you can type in text. So maybe having what you plan to say, exactly say, underneath that slide would be useful for me. But yeah, the more pieces you have in place, the better. And good news, tomorrow, probably not until the afternoon, because that's when I'll finally be on campus and have free time to focus on it. I am going to put up 3 past examples of presentations students have made. And they're all A-level presentations. Some of them are in the low A range, but they're all examples of good presentations. So all of them have issues, so they're not absolutely perfect, but they're all good examples of sort of what I expect. I'm not looking for the greatest presentations in the world, but I am looking for a presentation that's as professional as you can make it and that is matching the course concept that we've been talking about all month. Okay, and I'll give a little bit of refresher on what those are as we speak tonight. At this stage, does anybody have any questions over what I've gone over, what we're handing in on Sunday, and what's expected in terms of the draft? You can go ahead and type your question in the chat if you have one. Or if you're feeling brave, you can even raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can speak out loud. I'm going to move on in the meantime. Janet says, so far, so good. Okay, that sounds good. So let's get into the core concepts, okay? Because I don't have a ton to go over for today, but I do have some kind of important stuff. So let's get into that. Okay, there we are, week 3. Hello, welcome. We're halfway through, so I forgot to mention that at the beginning. So yay, we can see light at the end of the tunnel. The awesome thing about Full Sail is that the classes are short. The tough thing about Full Sail is that the classes are short. I mean, it's great because it's sort of like when you go in for a shot, right? I shouldn't compare it to something that scares so many people and communicates pain. But the great thing about a shot is that it's over in 2 seconds, or like when you rip a Band-Aid off all at once instead of slowly. So yeah, it's tough. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to keep up with. But on the other hand, it's over before you know it. Jasper asks, so our presentation will be a slideshow with voiceover. Yes, those are the two key elements. And in past sessions, I've been talking about how roughly you can think about presentations as being divided into two parts. There's the visual element, and then there's the content. And the content is not so much what's on your slides, because we're trying to break bad habits in this class. Actually, let me see if I can open PowerPoint real quickly. And this will be useful to both you guys and the people who watch this after the fact. PowerPoint. Okay. Now we have to wait for it to open. And plus, I want to show where the recording function is for people who do use PowerPoint. By the way, I would say that more than half the class doesn't use PowerPoint, but because a lot of people do, I'm going to show some things. But yeah, you don't have to use PowerPoint. Okay, so what happens in bad presentations is, right, this opens up. So right away, it's kind of encouraging us down a certain path. I always reject this and just choose a blank slide. Maybe I can, well, I wanted to show both a template and a blank slide. But let's start with a template, right? Then you click on your template of choice, and then the program opens up. And look, it already says click a title. So it's like CRP presentation. And then you add a slide, right? Where's this thing? It's been a while since I've had to use PowerPoint. I'm always using Keynote now. Oh, it's up here. No. Where's the stupid thing for add slide? Oh, here, right on the tool thing. Okay, so you open a new slide, and look what it's already doing. It's encouraging you to add a title, like introduction. Then it says click to add text, and this is where you start listing your bullet points, right? Blah, blah, blah. Then you go on to your second point. We're trying to prevent this, okay? I think even Nancy Duarte says that something like 90% of presentations are like this. You open up the presentation software, and you just start following the template, and what that results in is word-heavy slides. And word-heavy slides just aren't interesting because they're usually functioning one of two ways. I said this in week one. Either all of your information is on the slides, so while you're talking, the audience is reading. And if the audience finishes before you do, they're kind of waiting for you to speed up and get onto the next slide. Or they just might be frustrated and tune out because there's a wall of text on the screen. There's this person reading out loud pretty much what's exactly on the slide. And that just makes for pretty dull presentation watching. Or the slides kind of function as cue cards for the speaker. Right? But that's not how presentations should work. Your TED Talk presenters didn't walk out on stage and just start reading from slides or some sort of visual behind them, right? So what I always like to do is just, let's see, can I get a blank slide? I probably have to lose this thing I've already started. And if I can't show this easily, I'm just going to skip this. New presentation. Right. So what I'll have to do is just get rid of all this stuff. Right. Then I have a blank canvas to work from. And then I can follow the principles taught in this class, which is we're using simple, powerful visuals with limited text to act as sort of a visual anchor or background for what's really important. What is really important is what we have to say. Okay, we're the presenters. We have something hopefully interesting to say instead of putting tons of words on slides. And it's deceptively simple. I always tell people that the only challenging thing really is that it requires a paradigm shift. And by paradigm shift, I mean you have to flip that little switch in your head that's so used to doing things the old way to turn that off and try things a different way. But once you learn the different way, it is ridiculously simple. As a matter of fact, it's so simple you wonder, why did I have to take a class in this? But you actually sort of needed all that to learn the thought process behind these things. Because, yeah, successful presenters, they're not opening up templates and creating bullet point lists and lots of text. No, they're actually doing things the other way, which I think is very, very simple, but more effective. And then you also have a skill you can use for the rest of your life. Honestly, you'll never have problems creating presentations because it will be as simple as the techniques and concepts learned in this course. Oh, quickly about recording. So let's say you have some stuff on your slide that you like. So in PowerPoint, I think it's under the slideshow tab. Yeah. So you have this little record button, and this is where you can record um, your information for that particular slide. People who are more technologically adept know how to bring in sometimes stuff that we recorded elsewhere and bring it into the presentation. But if you're brand new to this stuff and you're uncomfortable, yeah, PowerPoint has its own record feature. Other programs should as well. So yeah, uh, Jasper's question, yes, you'll have a slideshow and voiceover. What was I going to say? Oh, I remember earlier I was talking about, yeah, I have 3 examples I'm going to share with people that I'll hopefully send out as an announcement tomorrow. So these are 3 past student examples. I'm going to put a big bold warning on there that says do not copy, imitate. They're up there because they're 3 very different presentations, but at least this way you get a sense of what presentations look and feel like and what successful presentations also look like and sound like, because you should hopefully see all 3. See that all 3 students had very different ways of handling the presentation. They go over a lot of the same core material, but do so in different ways. And really, to do well in this class, you just have to be following the principles that we've been talking about all month. If you can do that, it sort of doesn't matter if there are tiny little issues here or there. Or as I said last week, I do not grade based on your graphic design skills. Yes, I want you to be paying attention to making things look as nice as you can. Last week, I recommended to get a head start on Chapter 6 from Slideology, because that chapter is filled with great stuff about how to think visually. And actually, here, look at what we're looking at on the screen right now. This is an example of what I'm talking about. Content, how to make an impact, right? So here's a perfectly effective slide that I would use in a presentation, and I am using in a presentation, the presentation I'm giving right now. Sure, I could have filled this slide with bullet points and lots of text, including all the things that I'm saying out loud right now, but why do that? Just find a powerful video, right? Because here's a crater. Whenever an asteroid or whatever hits the Earth, it leaves an impact crater. So there's a nice connection there. But look, simple, powerful visual, limited use of text, and that just frees me up to deliver the information I need to give. And it's as simple as that. That's why I said it's deceptively simple, the concepts you learn in this class. But really, it really is going to give you a leg up, because I think I said maybe last week or in week 1, I told you I came to Full Sail terrible presentations. All those bad habits, that's what I used to do. Until I got here and noticed that some of my fellow teachers, yeah, they weren't giving go-to sessions that way at all. They were following the techniques that I'm using now, right? Find the right effective visual, limited use of text, and just make sure that the content that you're delivering out loud is useful, on topic, hopefully interesting for the student. And there, boom, you've got a presentation. And that just made presentation making so much easier and also so much fun. It's a lot more fun looking for the right image, choosing the right font, making things look pretty, and then separately working on what you're specifically going to say, instead of just opening up software and sort of going through it on the fly. That whatever you think, you put down in words on the slide, and that's it. Okay. And by the way, it's not that you can never use text or you could never use bullet points. We're just trying to get away from an over-reliance on those techniques. Hold on a second, because my cursor has disappeared. You can see it on your end, but I can't, because sometimes I have to minimize and open things back up again. And I still don't see my arrow. Let's see if I can get the control panel out of the way, maybe. Okay, that's going to have to do. A reminder to focus on audience. I've said a lot about this, so I'm just going to move ahead. But yeah, literally put yourself in your audience's shoes. For example, I'm already seeing in planning documents and they don't get points taken off, because I think the planning document is sort of penalty free, in the sense that as long as you're answering those prompts on the sheet thoroughly, and you gave me a somewhat clear sense of what you're planning to do in your presentation, that should be fine. But already I'm making comments like, you don't need to define computer animation, or you don't need to define graphic design for your audience, because they would already know what that is. So yeah, we can learn a lot if we truly put ourselves in our audience's shoes. We can spot everything from unclear sentences to ideas that just your potential. Remember, we're speaking to potential employers, so ideas that they wouldn't need to know. Oversharing. So maybe someone who says, I grew up in 1984. I was born July 9th, 1984 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. My parents divorced when I was 12. And that's when I sort of closed myself off and went to my room and picked up my guitar. And that's when I fell in love with music. I mean, there might be a potentially interesting anecdote there, but I'm not sure all that information is needed. Um, Certainly not your date of birth. So yeah, be careful. And you can catch a lot of these things: oversharing, ideas that don't need to be communicated, defining things that, again, your audience would already know if you truly put yourself in your audience's shoes. And actually, since I just mentioned possibly beginning with a personal anecdote, this is a good segue into the issue of telling stories. So Nancy Duarte mentions this again and again in her chapters: the importance of storytelling. Uh, Storytelling in the form of personal anecdotes can be especially powerful. So, in the sort of joking oversharing example I gave, maybe there's something potentially there, though. As long as it doesn't feel too personal and too intimate, like you're turning the session into a therapist couch, maybe there is something powerful about beginning with an anecdote about when you first fell in love with music. Or maybe there was a certain game that really just blew you away, and that was the day you fell in love with video games and knew you wanted to do this for a career. Or maybe you don't have to go so far back to what originally inspired you to fall in love with something. Maybe there's a day you just realized, yeah, this is what I want to do for a career. I remember reading this article, or I remember watching this interview. Okay, so telling stories, personal stories, can be a technique we use in our presentations. Excuse me. Be careful, however. You only have 3 to 4 minutes to work with. So when you do share short anecdotes, they'll have to be kept pretty short. They also don't have to be personal. Maybe there's something going on currently in your industry that's worth highlighting. Maybe there's something about someone you know. Maybe there's an anecdote from history. Yeah, there are lots of potential stories out there. So that's one technique we can use. And if we think of storytelling in the bigger sense, by bigger sense, I mean stories have a 3-act structure, and your presentation as a whole also needs to think this way. So sure, individual anecdotes or stories can be terrific as attention-grabbing techniques. But this is sort of common sense. But stories have a beginning, middle, and end, right? Essays also have a beginning, middle, and end, although we call it introduction, body, conclusion. Your presentation also needs a sense of a start, an in between, and a finish. Again, there are lots of different ways to begin your presentation. We've already mentioned beginning with some sort of anecdote or some sort of example or story that's maybe going on in the news or in your industry or from history. You could use powerful quotations. You could use surprising statistics. I once had a music student mention the declining record industry sales, which is probably a risky thing to mention in a presentation because you don't want to make it sound like you're being negative, but he didn't. He was able to use it in a way that was positive and showed, ultimately, his entire presentation showed his excitement that he's ready to work for this organization, this record label. He's excited to jump on board and continue working in the music industry and selling music digitally. I'm having trouble describing it exactly because you would have to see it. But yeah, that all started with a sort of interesting factoid, right? Something that's currently going on in the industry. So sure, anecdote, something surprising fact or interesting fact, a quotation. These are all great techniques, but they become lousy techniques if they're just used generically. Okay. By the way, these are also techniques. This might ring a bell because you probably learned this when it came to essay writing, either in high school or if you took a college level English class somewhere else, you've probably heard these tricks before too, right? Begin with a quotation, begin with a personal story, begin with an interesting fact or statistic, begin with a hypothetical scenario. Yeah, all those techniques can apply to your presentation as well, and they're awesome. But yes, they become lousy if you just use them generically. For instance, um, if you know or have a quotation in mind, or you maybe remember something powerful that someone in your industry said, and you want to quote that person, great. But there's nothing more awkward than someone just quoting Shakespeare for no reason. Or maybe there is a connection between the Shakespeare quote and your material, but it seems forced. Or a student goes to one of those quotation websites and just picks a useful quotation. So yeah, all the choices you make should be natural, and hopefully they come from the power of your own brainstorming. You should be able to sit back, close your eyes, brainstorm, and hopefully come up with these different techniques that you think would be cool and easy to use and natural sounding in your presentation. So yeah, you'll need some sort of opening move. The middle, of course, is going to contain the meat of your presentation. So this is where you'll discuss skills, qualifications, all that good stuff. Note that you can still use those different techniques even in the middle portion of your presentation. And obviously you'll need a closing or ending of some sort. Again, any of those moves work well here. Another neat trick is what I like to call the bookending technique, which means whatever sort of technique used in the beginning of a presentation, you can come back to it at the end. So maybe you start telling a story in the beginning, but hold off on the ending until the end of your presentation. Or maybe you invoke something at the beginning, someone's name, someone's quotation, some anecdote from history. And then again, you return to it in the end. It's sort of like an echo. That always produces nice closure, this sense of you're sort of tying things up really, really neatly. That sort of return to where you began. But yes, think of things in terms of a start, middle, and finish. Okay, the critical moment. This is also what we call the star moment. And I have to apologize. I meant to cover this in last week's session because actually your planning document had a question about what is your star moment. And STAR simply stands for something they'll always remember. Obviously, the acronym kind of tells you what this means. But if you think of your TED Talk presentations, maybe some of your chosen speakers had a really powerful move that they made. The textbook gives the example of Bill Gates, who is no longer in charge of Microsoft. He's actually more interested in philanthropic efforts now, such as helping out people in Africa. And in a presentation where he's trying to bring this awareness of health concerns, especially malaria, to his audience, he walked out on stage with a jar of mosquitoes and opened it up and let them go. Like, that's a pretty flamboyant move, but that's something you'll always remember. Or Steve Jobs, I think this is an example from your textbook too. He was trying to show off the thinness of a new MacBook, so he just pulled one out of a manila envelope he was carrying. Like, that's a pretty attention-grabbing move. Your moves aren't going to be so flamboyant. You don't have to even try to aim for something like that. Your star moments, you're something they'll always remember. Quite simply, it should be a specific moment in your presentation that you're particularly proud of. Maybe there's one slide where you're just really, really proud of the design work or the image that you chose or the way you word things to match that specific slide. Hopefully there's at least one moment in your presentation that you're particularly proud of, because if you are, probably your audience is going to notice it too. So yeah, you don't have to think about like super flamboyant moves. And we can think of star moments as falling under 5 general types. I've just described with the Bill Gates example a memorable dramatization, so something that's acted out or done performance-wise in front of your audience. Most students will not appear in front of the camera, so you don't really have to worry too much about that one. Repeatable sound bites. I'm going to give some examples of those on some future slides, but this is being very, very aware of how you say things, how you word things. For instance, Steve Jobs' name is going to actually come up a lot in this presentation. But there was one talk he gave where he was introducing an iPhone, the new iPhone. I think it was the very first iPhone, to be honest. And he kept saying the phrases, redesign the phone. He would say, this is a redesign of the telephone, or this is a redesigning of the phone, right? And he would repeat that throughout his talk, and that was on purpose. He wanted to get that idea actually, I think it was reinvent. Now that I think of it, reinvent the phone, or we're reinventing the phone. And that was actually a strategic decision because he wants to get that in people's minds. The iPhone was certainly brand new. So, yeah, this idea that the iPhone is doing something brand new, he wanted to make sure that through what he said, that was remembered. We've talked about evocative visuals. Okay. Um, you should be choosing powerful visuals to act as backdrops or anchors for what you're saying. Storytelling, we've also just talked about, so I'm going to skip that. And the final one, which I cannot see because my control panel is blocking it, is, oh yeah, shocking statistics. I would say surprising statistics. Shocking suggests, I don't know, something dangerous or scary. And I'll give an example of a surprising factor statistic in just a second. Let me take a quick sip of my coffee because I'm getting dry mouth and throat. Okay. That previous slide has sound, so I'm going to skip by it. And actually, I'll get back to repeatable sound bites because I have another example to share. Visuals we've already talked about. By the way, I'm going to get away from the presentation for just 1 second. I know I introduced this in week 1, but because some people may not have seen that lesson, let me just repeat that any visuals you use in your presentation have to be allowable. So we don't just Google things like, let's try Taylor Swift, right? Because I love Taylor Swift. I really do. So, for example, you type someone's name, you get these images, and you might think, ooh, I'll use this one, or I'll use that one. No, first of all, I doubt Taylor Swift is going to appear in your presentation, but we can only use allowable images. So, anybody in the session remember where we can go for allowable images while I take us there? If you want to show off in the chat. Yeah. Okay, so one place is the Full Sail library. We all know how to get there, right? You all know how to get to Full Sail Connect. So once we log in, you can search for the library under organizations, but it's much simpler and faster just to choose it from the menu here on the left. So we go to library, we go to research databases, and as you can see, and actually remind me, Jasper, I think I know your field. It's video game something, either design or game art. And Janet, what's your area of study? By the way, here it is, AP Images Collection. So it's like the third item that comes up in the research database. And then we can go in. So Jasper's game art. Janet, are you still with us? What is your industry? AP Images, AP stands for Associated Press. So obviously these are the types of photos that get used in newspaper articles. It's great when you're looking for a specific person or a specific event. It's not so great when you're looking for general things. But yeah, let's say we were looking for, let's say we wanted a picture of a game console. Okay, so I could do a search for Xbox and see what I come up with. So you can see they're not great visuals because they're all like pictures of conventions, right? E3, famous video game conference. Okay. So these might not be the greatest visuals. If you picture this in a presentation, it sort of looks chaotic, maybe a little bit sloppy. But maybe we could do video games in general. Yeah, I mean, you have to go through this. Again, AP, I think, has a more limited function. It's greater when you're looking for things that probably were in the news. How about a video game controller? And I'm going to show you another place to get images that's usually much, much more successful. But here's one. Okay, let's say, I don't know why you would have the, what is this, a motion controller, right? Or here's the Wii. So I don't know, maybe that image would work. It'd be kind of hard to put text over that, but anyway, when you find an image you like, you just have to grab this number here and make sure it appears somewhere next to the image. That tells me you got it from the Associated Press and that the photo is allowable. So that's one place you can go to. Another great one, this is better for when you're looking for general photos, like let's say you're doing something in education, so you want a picture of students or you want a picture of a classroom. Compfight.com is a Flickr search tool. And yeah, I can search for just about anything. So let's say I wanted to look for pictures of dogs. First of all, anything above the dotted line, do not use, because this is shilling for another site. You should never have to pay for things as a college student. But yeah, you choose an image that you like, you click on it. And this is good. I forgot to click the correct filter. We cannot use anything that's all rights reserved. That means it's copywritten. That means we're not allowed to use it. So yeah, to make sure we get good results, you see on the left here, instead of any license, we need to click on commercial. You might think, well, I've heard of Creative Commons before, and I've heard that has something to do with images you're allowed to use. Yes, but technically, because Full Sail is a for-profit university and takes copyright issues very, very seriously, we should technically click commercial. If you accidentally click Creative Commons, I'm not going to scream, but there was a reason why that first dog picture I looked on looked so good because it's copywritten. But okay, let's how about this guy here? Okay, so we find a picture that we like, and this is what we want to see. Some rights reserved. That means we can use it. Okay, we just have to give credit. This part is always difficult for students to remember, even though it's really simple. Instead of taking the full HTML, we don't need code. We're not designing websites. If you can find the URL and just grab it and then put it next to the photo, that's good. And then you can download whatever sized image you want. So, boom. Do I still have PowerPoint open? So anyway, what I was saying is that sometimes I like to get rid of everything because I don't want to use those templates. And it's as simple as going and get my image. Looks like I can't do both at the same time. Hold on. Let me drag some things out of the way. Okay, so it's a matter of just going and getting my image. That I've lost. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, here we go. And dragging it in. Right? Boom. There's my slide. Now I just have to choose appropriate text and put it somewhere that's visually appearing on my document. And I've got an image. So let's say I'm doing something about, I don't know, supporting shelters, right? So that we can deal with the overpopulation of, what do you call them? Not random pets, but you know what I'm trying to say. Pets that don't have a home. There's a name for it, but a common word, and I can't think of it right now. So let's just move on. But does this make sense? Yeah, Jasper, it's foster. But I was thinking, what do you call runaway dogs that are on the streets and runaway animals? I don't know. But that's what I was trying to say. So imagine I'm doing some sort of public service announcement, right? There's my image. All I need to do is pick an appropriate, pretty looking text, but also one that, by the way, don't go crazy with fonts either. If you pick something that's too wild, it might be difficult to read. Or if I pick something that's cutesy looking, like a comic book style, that might clash with the tone of what you're going for. But certainly look for the right font. If I go back to my keynote presentation, right? So this image here, okay, there's a successful use of font and image, right? Pretty simple though. Okay, let me barrel through this stuff because I'm almost done. I don't want to keep you here forever. Okay, so visuals. There's an example, right? We go to those two places. If you find, here's another powerful visual. If you find some other Creative Commons type source, just make sure that you include the URL, okay? I need to, and I literally will look at all your images because I do not want to see copywritten images. It's not just for this class, but throughout your Full Sail studies. Yeah, you're not going to be able to do that. And Full Sail takes that very, very seriously. We lost Janet, by the way. So Jasper, it's just me and you. And here's just an example, right? A typical presentation would just put words on a slide. But if we pair it with the right image, it becomes more powerful. We've already talked about storytelling, and I use this TED Talk by Susan Cain as an example on the discussion board. Didn't mean to open it. Here's an example of a surprising factor statistic. Okay, Steve Jobs talking about uh, iTunes or something. Hold on, the control panel is again blocking my view of things. Okay, we are selling over 5 million songs a day. Isn't that unbelievable? 5 million songs a day. That's 58 songs every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Okay, so that might be a useful way to either share an important piece of information in the middle of your presentation, or maybe you would begin your presentation that way. Also, you might have trouble seeing it, but this is also an example of a repeatable soundbite. Repeatable soundbites can also occur on the micro level, at the sentence level. Notice that last line, 58 songs of every second, every minute, every hour, every day. Okay, it's carefully crafted to sound like that. And let's see. Let me fly through this. There's another pretty visual. Like all this would need is a simple amount of text, probably in the top left corner, and we have a powerful image. Make sure that your images match the presentation that you're actually giving, though. There'd be nothing more awkward than seeing an image like this, and yet you're giving a presentation on mobile app design. Unless there's a clear connection, like here, the 3 pillars of public speaking. I'm going to breeze through this stuff because I want to keep this session under an hour. These are fancy Greek words: ethos, pathos, logos. Probably the more important two are on the right. Pathos is the appeal to emotion. That's why we have that sad dog picture. Logos is the appeal to logic, which is why we have Mr. Spock there. Plus, I like Star Trek. But in your presentations, you can make use of both. Obviously, your presentation isn't probably going to be super emotional, super sad, but there might be something in your personal anecdote that's relatable. Even choosing the right visuals can have an emotional effect on someone. Remember, emotion just doesn't mean that you're going to be crying. Just some closing reminders. We've heard about that cliche. You never have a second chance to make a first impression. Absolutely true. So here you have a similar quote from Nancy Duarte, our textbook author. The audience learns all they know about you, based solely on how you appear for the first time. And we all know this is true. You can't go to a job interview wearing sweatpants and a dirty t-shirt. I mean, you could, but that doesn't give the right impression. The same thing happens with your presentations. I do get maybe 1, sometimes 2 every month where, yeah, it's just thrown together. Not much attention paid to how things look on the slide. Instead of scripting, by the way, you should be scripting your voiceover, getting everything absolutely perfect so you can record it. And then if you slip up, just re-record it again. But that's what's awesome about this class. You don't have to go live in front of an actual audience and make sure that you do things perfectly. You have the opportunity to sit in your bedroom or your office or your dorm room and make sure that things are absolutely perfect. I mean, how awesome is that? But yeah, you should be scripting what you have to say and making sure that it's just right. Because just to throw something together or press record, the record function on PowerPoint, and just wing it, that's not going to be very successful. That's not a very good first impression. Okay, so questions, comments, concerns? We have one person left in the room. So Jasper, if you have anything to ask about the presentation or anything at all about the class in general, you can ask. You can ask away. I see your hand is up. Do you want to be unmuted so you can ask away, or did your hand go up by mistake? And for people who are going to be watching this video after the fact, actually, this last slide is kind of important. That we'll be going through peer feedback, and you'll be getting feedback from me because there's always room for improvement. I'm going to unmute Jasper so he can speak. Okay, sir, go ahead.
You hear me? Just want to make sure my
Actually, I'm not hearing you, and I have this problem sometimes. So hold on a second. I'm going to try to unplug my headset.
hear me now or
Now, can you hear me, Jasper?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, and I can hear you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, awesome. Well, because I'm going into game art, when I do like a presentation for, any future employers, I'm going to have like a slideshow full of my work. How am I supposed to, how do you want me to implement that into my slideshow even though I don't have that yet?
Okay, some of your words cut out. You were saying that you would normally have examples of your work.
Yeah, so I would have like video examples of all the 3D models I've made and just like all of the work that I have done to show that I can, that I am able, I'm not just, talking, like I actually can do it. So how would I implement that in the slideshow even though I don't have that yet?
Right. Wow, that's a fantastic question I've never had before. Basically, I would need to speak to you. Do you have any ideas off the top of your head? Because you won't be able to invent obviously something within that time
Yeah,
frame.
yeah. So like, would you rather have me put like placer images in and just talk as if that is my work, or
Right. No, I would rather have you either go in a different direction or see if there are allowable images that kind of capture that's something close to what you're talking about. So in that sense, it would be a little bit placeholder, but yeah, I don't want to see like blank slides or completely off.
well, yeah, no, yeah, that's what I mean. Like instead of it being like my actual work, like just like an example of like 3D models made from a video game or something, and then just talk as if those were the ones that I made.
Yes, that would be an
Or
okay work. That would be a good workaround.
okay, awesome, thank you.
Okay, sir. I'll go ahead and mute you again. Um, Actually, I'm glad that question got recorded because people might learn from that. Um, Actually, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording because probably at this stage, even if people do have questions, things are going to start slowing down. So let me go ahead and stop that. And thanks to the people who are watching this after the fact.